Hello, everybody. Welcome for joining us this afternoon. My name is Michael Kramer, and I'd like to welcome everyone to the March 2023 monthly webinar presented to you by Perry Johnson Laboratory Accreditation. My name is Michael Kramer, and I am presenting today on behalf of PJLA. I am the Calibration and Inspection Program Manager at Perry Johnson. So thanks again, everyone, for joining in, logging in. Today we're going to talk about the topic for March is Section 8.5, as you can see, which is a section entitled Actions to Address Risk and Opportunities. As always, this webinar is being recorded. If I have any first-timers here, more than welcome to visit the PJLA website. Follow the tab for webinars, where you can go back and listen to this particular one or an array of various webinars that Perry Johnson has broadcast in the past. You're also able to receive the individual slides if you could utilize them in your organization. Currently, everyone's muted. I cannot hear y'all. Hopefully, everybody can hear me okay. There should be a question tab provided for you. At the end of the session, I'll go back and look at that tab. So if you have any questions in regards to this section and the requirements, feel free to type it in here in the tab provided, the block, and we'll review them at the conclusion of today's presentation. So Section 8.5, Actions to Address Risk and Opportunities. ISO IEC 17025 2017, when the standard was revised in 2017, this is a section that was added. The standard now emphasizes risk-based thinking. It's about optimizing your organization's overall strategy by planning, taking and recording actions that prevent risk and enhance opportunity. The implication is that your system will alert you to risk and opportunities because it will be based on a proactive risk-based approach embedded within your system. So when you look at risk and opportunities, consider that you're weighing them against each other. You're assessing risk in the contents of the laboratory must be viewed with the organization's overall strategy in mind. It's likely that your laboratory is already employing actions stipulated in 8.5. But how do you demonstrate that you have addressed these requirements, or does your system need updating to meet requirements? One thing I like to stress, particularly for organizations that's been in business for a while, have plenty of repeat customers. This is something, even if you are new to 17025, even prior to these requirements here, something that's probably been done all along, considering risk and opportunities as they are presented. Chances are, if not, an organization may not be around that long. So if you think about it, it's something that we go about doing every day, just in our normal lives. Some examples include, when I say we address it, we address it every day without so much as thinking about how we're doing it, but doing things such as driving, something a lot of us take for granted, but considering risk and associated with it, many of us will keep off the cell phones, keep our basic system in good order, and even replacing windshield wipers once in a while can make a big difference and it reduce the risk of having an accident. Preparing food, keeping the surface clean, avoiding the transfer of bacteria from uncooked food to your hands, countertop, and utensils can greatly reduce the risk of becoming ill from eating ill-prepared foods. Stairways, just often automatically grab onto that railing. Um, just by doing that alone, the risk of a fall can be significantly reduced. Non-routine tasks, just as changing a light bulb in a ceiling fan, perhaps a couple alternatives to reach it uh, in order to reduce the risk. Get a good hammer, hammer, a ladder, and not a step stool or a chair. Or using harsh chemicals to clean. When you clean, with those latex gloves on to protect your hands. Yard work, wearing the proper shoes, operating power equipment, good leather gloves are some precautions that we subconsciously take aware. So subconsciously, every day we're taking actions to adversely the impact of a negative outcome. Like I was mentioning, even in an organization is something that subconsciously that's been being done. Just probably haven't thought about how we or the organizations have been going about doing it. I want to look at some common definitions when you think of risk and opportunities, risk-based thinking. So risk itself can be defined as what makes achievement and objective uncertain. Level of risk, an expression of the importance of the risk taken into account the consequences and the likelihood of a situation. Risk evaluation, comparison of the level of risk with the acceptance criteria. Risk treatments, many options are possible. It can be combined, such as avoiding the risk, taking the risk to seize an opportunity, eliminating the source of the risk, or changing the likelihood of occurrence or consequences, or sharing the risk, or simply accept the risk as it is and informed on it. Evaluate the risk. Hey, even if it's a high risk, hey, an option is simply to accept the risk. Residual risk is the risk remaining after risk treatment. So a risk initially may be too high and maybe risk avoidance. However, perhaps something can be done to lower the risk to an acceptable level. Not eliminated all the way, but to a lower risk than was initially presented. This risk and opportunity. So opportunity is an event with positive outcomes for the organizations. Risk management. Appropriately optimizing success with minimal threat and maximum opportunities. I mentioned risk mitigation, and to reduce the extent of risk exposure and the adverse effects of risk. So a simple depiction of a risk mitigation plan. Step one, they have to identify the risk. The risk needs to be identified, analyzed. Deliberations are needed to uncover, recognized, and describe the risk that might affect your project or its outcomes. Identification. Step two, evaluate. What's the probability and the impact of the identified risk? And then step three, each is risk treatment. Each risk treatment strategy can be described in terms of likelihood and impact. The likelihood of the risk appearing and the impact that it would have on the organization. High impact, low impact, no impact if the risk did occur. So some examples of, hey, you accept the risk. Typically that's something, if you think of something that would have a low likelihood of occurring and it would have a low impact on the organization if it has. come across a risk where you determine risk avoidance would be something after you evaluate it, determine, hey, it's a high likelihood the risk could occur, and it would potentially have a high impact on the organization. Risk transfer, or I like to refer to that as shared risk. That would be, for an example, the example I like to throw out there for shared risk or risk transfer, have an organization, testing or calibration lab, a potential client would like to utilize your services. This is a huge client. It's going to require a lot of additional resources on your port, human resources, capital resources, more equipment perhaps to support this client. Hey, great opportunity. But there's a risk there. Initial outlay, perhaps the risk of this particular client. Hey, will they be around a year or two from now after this investment was made? Risk transfer or shared risk would be, hey, the potential client perhaps could share in that risk, perhaps provide some initial resources or capital for the organization to get started. Maybe very convenient, very close to the lab and the potential client, and may be able to perhaps share the risk and reduce it to an acceptable level. So risk mitigation, again, that's where you acknowledge the risk, but however, don't accept it, but something's in place to lower it perhaps to a more acceptable level. A situation with either a medium or high likelihood of occurrence, or a high impact within the organization that was to happen. So we're into the requirements now here. Not a great big section in 17025. We see the word shall here several times, which is a requirement. So the laboratory shall consider the risk and opportunities associated with the laboratory activities in order to, A, give assurance that the management system achieves its intended results. B, enhance opportunities to achieve the purpose and objectives of the laboratory. C, prevent or reduce undesirable impact and potential failures in the laboratory activities. And D, achieve improvements. 852, another shall. The laboratory shall plan actions to address risk and opportunities, and how to integrate and implement these actions into the management system and evaluate the effectiveness of these actions. So risk-based thinking, there's a whole lot of information out there on this topic. There's a note within the standard. It comes right out of 17025 that it specifies the laboratory plans actions to address risk. There's no requirement for formal methods or risk management or a documented risk management process. Laboratories can decide whether or not to develop a more extensive risk methodology than is required by this document through the application of other guidance documents, for example. So as an assessor, it's a hard part to assess. I mentioned there's a whole lot of material up there. I did basically on my laptop here, did a search under risk-based thinking. I got 589 million results in a half a second. So a lot of information out there on this topic. To identify risk, it's useful to consider both the internal content of the organization, also the external context. That would be like risk related, for example, to your customer, to your supplier, but also to the customers of the client and other stakeholders of your client. Risk identification methods can range from common sense and brainstorming to the use of pre-established lists for a professional sector to use of the standards setting good practices. The assessment of risk can be addressed answering the following questions. What can happen and why? Identify the risk. What are the consequences? What is the probability of their future occurrence? There are many factors that mitigate the consequences of risk, or that reduce the probability of risk. So basically, those three what's there are a good way to start creating a record when show compliance with this standard. And then risk treatment from there. I mentioned shared risk again. Create a record that this is taking place. So our requirements, we just looked at the shalls. Just need to, as an assessor or an internal audit, just need to see that this is taking place. There's a lot of tools out there. This is something off the Google search. Basically, creating a record where a risk has been identified, severity of the risk, then the risk is evaluated, treatment, and then we look at it again as far as post mitigation. So pre-mitigation, perhaps not okay to proceed, and then perhaps massage it a little, lower the risk, and hopefully mitigate it to a level where it's acceptable to proceed. This tool also has various tabs in the back there that sort of guides as far as grading the risk and the occurrence and the severity of the risk. All right, bear with me. All right, requirement. Actions to address risk and opportunity shall be proportional to the impact and the validity of laboratory results. So if a risk occurs, the most severe risk are those that are going to impact your final product, which is your testing or calibration results that you provide your customers. So there's, again, right out of the standard, we have a couple notes. Notes are not requirements. Additional information. Note 1, options to address risk can include, and we've probably gone over these, identifying or avoiding the threats, taking the risk in order to pursue an opportunity, eliminate the risk, source, changing the likelihood or consequences. We talked about sharing the risk or retaining the risk by informed decisions. Opportunities can be considered for such things as perhaps you want to expand the scope of your accreditation, or addressing the needs of new customers, looking at new technology and other possibilities to address customer needs. So just mention there's a lot of tools out there. This slide here just list a few that you may or may not have heard of, different ways of adopting risk-based thinking. I once worked at an organization that wanted to SWOT everything. It was a larger organization, and SWOT analysis there. So this includes failure mode and effects analysis, hazard and operational studies, risk management checklist, Pareto charts, fishbone diagram, fault tree, SWOT analysis, risk-informed decision-making, brainstorming. And there's a reference there for ISO 31000 principles and guidance for risk management. Like I said, there's a whole lot of information out there, a whole lot of tools, a whole lot of methodology. We have labs, I know they're accredited, small, larger labs that are part of a larger organization, want to pick one or adopt something that's going to work for your organization. Mention a SWOT analysis. So SWOT is an acronym that stands for strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats. SWOT analysis is a organized list of your business greatest strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats. We're going to look at a example of this. It's non-laboratory, however, but it sort of drives a point across as far as utilizing a SWOT analysis. And the example I want to give is this organization here, Delightful Dog Grooming, want to create a SWOT. Want to do a SWOT analysis for the purpose of creating a marketing action plan. I'm going to make a list: strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats. First thing this organization looked at was its strength. Many return customers, customer satisfaction. They say they like their services. They got that positive word of mouth. They get some walk-in business. They have a mobile grooming van that has an eye-catching logo and gives exposure when they're performing on-site services. Look at their weakness. They don't pay much attention to marketing, hence they're trying to develop a marketing plan here. Depends a lot on word of mouth and their website. Their website, however, is purely informational and static. They don't have a marketing plan. They don't have much of a marketing budget to work with. Opportunities, look out there, see what sort of opportunities there are to market their services. Taking advantage of the increasing popularity of dogs, increasing the use of social media, increase the amount of walk-in traffic, a local annual pet fair, take advantage of kennel clubs, rescue societies, local SPCA. And then threats. Came and provided a list here. There's other dog grooming businesses in town. Competition is increasing. One dog grooming business has a series of radio ads running, and is also running the newspaper ads once a week. Another competitor has partnered with the local SPCA to host a dog washing grooming day every few months. In order helping out the SPCA by getting donations there. And the expense of running media ads was determined to be a threat. So after that list was developed, some questions that were asked, hopefully to come up with a plan, looking at all the risk, in order to pursue this opportunities. So do strengths open up any opportunities? By looking at this list, customers are saying they like their services and are willing to recommend them. Could create some sort of a referral reward program to actively encourage referrals. A loyalty program or repeat customers could be developed. Could try to increase walk-ins, having an eye-catching window display. Consider relocating the business that would get more and more walk-in traffic. Looking to setting up a booth at local animal pet fairs. See if kennel clubs, rescue society, etc. are interested in partnership. Increase the use of social media and navigate other low costs. So they didn't have much of a operating budget for marketing there, of promoting the business. How they convert their weakness to strength. Looking at opportunities that list as weaknesses. Looks like social media could be the real marketing opportunity instead of just having an informational website. Business could be put up a Facebook page or a Twitter account. Try to reach out to old and new customers because dogs are so popular. Might be helpful to tweet as a dog. Rover says regularly grooming makes them happy and healthy. Pinterest and Instagram might also be good options. Pictures of cute pets are also very popular. What do we have to do with these opportunities? What do we have to do with these opportunities? Well, with the wheels in motion here, set up a social media business accounts page. They're already familiar with Facebook and Twitter. Set aside time, assign staff persons to update Facebook, Twitter accounts, set up a Pinterest, Instagram accounts, purchase a camera and train a staff person to take photos of animals and post images. Canvas staff for Facebook contest ideals. Find out details of annual pet fairs, such as when it runs and how much a booth table would cost there. How much it would cost. What do we have to do to use these opportunities? Scout out possible new business location, contact a realtor about more centralized business location where many people walk their pets. Canvas kennels clubs, dog rescues, groups for possible partnership. Contact window artists for quotes on windows display. Decide on referral discounts and customer loyalty schemes and notify existing customers. How do we neutralize our threats? Without a bigger marketing budget, we can't run competing radio and newspapers ad campaigns, although it would be a good idea to run occasional ads. Might be able to offset the competition newspaper and radio through developing online presence as above and make a marketing campaign on social media. So after all that, the results are, as you can see, this SWOT analysis has created the seeds of an action marketing plan, providing a clear direction for how the small business encounter their competitors' marketing out efforts and increase their own customer base. So that was one example of a tool that's out there. It may or may not work for your organization. Another one is just a simple risk checklist. Bear in mind, just looking to create records, as far as compliance and compliance to 17025. A risk checklist are tools for risk identifications that can be used at the earliest stage of risk identification to learn from past products and past team members' experience. The list helps to better understand the required contingency and help managers to more effectively control scope growth throughout the opportunity development process. The use of risk checklists is the final step of risk identification to ensure that common risks are not overlooked. So what is it? Risk checklists are a historical list of risks identified or realized on past projects. Risk checklists are meant to be shared between all involved parties within the organization. Why do you want to use a risk checklist? The benefit is maintaining a risk checklist is to capture corporate knowledge and ensure that common risks are not overlooked in the risk management process. What does it do? Risk checklist serves as a final step in the risk identification process to ensure that common risks are not overlooked. So again, I mentioned this is a hard part to assess. You see there are some shalls there, but how an organization goes about complying with it, there's a lot of flexibility there. Right here in the introduction of 17025, it states this document requires a laboratory to plan and implement actions to address risk and opportunities. Addressing both risk and opportunities establishes a basis for increasing the effectiveness of the management system, achieving improved results, and preventing negative feedback. Who's responsible? Well, the laboratory is responsible for deciding which risks and opportunities need to be addressed. The accrediting body, however, assesses whether the laboratory has established appropriate actions for dealing with risk and opportunities. This is, of course, what's going to vary among laboratories in certain instances. Requirement for impartiality is a good example. Happen to have your standard close by. If you look at the very first time risk appears, and you'll see a shall there under 414. It has to do with risk to impartiality. So various labs may need to look at this differently. A privately owned independent lab with many customers where the owner or lab personnel has no other ownership in the entities may or may not need extensive measures to protect impartiality. How often are things changing? I think is the key there for impartiality. It needs to be evaluated, but how often are things changing as far as how this needs to be looked at if you look at 414 on an ongoing basis. Other situations may require alternate considerations. You may have a lab with only one customer. We're looking at risk to impartiality here. A lab where the owner also owns some of the customers. A lab within a manufacturer also taking on third-party work. A lab with minimum wage staff and a culture known for corruption. A lab where its ownership is complex and keep changing, and does that to the relationship of the bodies within the structure. It's not one shoe fits all here is basically what I'm trying to present here. So I'm going to look at under technical example here. So we have a requirement here under 6410. This is under equipment. When intermediate checks are necessary to maintain confidence in the performance of equipment, these checks shall be carried out according to a procedure. So this is checks you run on your equipment to assure that, hey, they're operating correctly, the integrity of the calibration is still intact. How often do you have to do it? This is a good example on, hey, let's look at risk. Say you're doing intermediate checks every day. Hey, it takes away personnel, time, efforts to run these checks every day. It's an opportunity there showing that your equipment is staying within predefined limits of acceptance, and the possibility of non-conforming calibration or testing may be greatly reduced if you do it every day. The complexity of this will vary according to the risks. One thing that may want to consider is the actual equipment itself. A gauge block or a mass standard, if they're used as references, may need very little in the way of intermediate checks. You have a gauge block or a mass standard that you incorporate it into your testing or calibration activities. They're pretty stable. They tend not to drift as long as they're handled correctly. On the other hand, sensitive equipment items exhibiting drift may need more frequent checks. Plotting and calculations from comparisons resulting in drifting reference values may be identified. So looking at the risk and looking at this requirement, how performing intermediate checks, maybe something to consider here is the device itself and the risk of non-conforming work associated with standards or equipment drifting out of tolerance. So the standard does address risk. There are some shalls there. The standard does say the laboratory decides what the risks and opportunities to pursue. However, there are some shalls there. So right off the bat there under 414, the laboratory shall address risk to impartiality on an ongoing basis. Very first thing there is, hey, it needs to be done initially. Even if it's a small organization, it's a good idea to show a record that this has been done, even if there is no risk. Hey, you look at the risk. Hey, there is zero or a very, very low risk, and there's no action needed. But as you can see there, an ongoing basis. Well, we're going to look at that a little bit more detail here in a little bit. One thing, the management review does force your hand here a little bit. Under M, an input for the management review. One of the inputs is the results of risk identification. So if not captured anywhere else, hey, it needs to be, it's one of the inputs for your management reviews. Under reporting the results, when a statement of compliance, when a statement of conformity to a specification or standard is provided, the laboratory shall document the decision rule, taking into account the level of risk, such as false accept, false reject, and statistical assumptions associated with the decision rule employed and applied to decision rule. So maybe on two sides of this. If you're a calibrator there and you're providing reports to your customers, this is something that needs to be presented to the customer in advance. Also needs to be documented on the report. So the level of risk associated with, if you're not familiar with what we're referring to, the decision rule is how measurement uncertainty is accounted for when you say a device or an artifact was within or out of tolerance. Uncertainty may impact it, so you have to take the level of risk into account with the decision rule that's employed. So typically that could be anything from strict guard banding to 99%, where the risk of false acceptance could be a 0.5%, or it could be on the other extreme where you don't take it into account. You're utilizing simple acceptance. Level of risk associated with that's a shared risk. Worst case scenario, right on the line, it would have to be could be up to 50%. That's something that both an organization that's providing the services has to look at a level of risk on how they take measurement uncertainty into account. Also, the receiving organization would need to look at that and determine, hey, was uncertainty taken into account, and the level of risk is associated with it when the organization is stating, hey, my devices were all within tolerances. Non-conforming work. Would be right under there, under the procedure shall ensure actions, including the halting and repeating of work and withholding reports, or based upon the risk levels associated by the lab. So if you have a non-conforming issue there that may have impacted your customers' reports, that's what you determine, hey, what's the likelihood that they impacted reports that we actually have provided our customers? What's the level of risk? So the slight risk may have been 1/10 of a degree, outside of predetermined limits of performing a calibration or test, or perhaps it was a check on equipment that showed since last week the equipment has drifted way out of tolerance and may have possibly impacted that customer's results. Under corrective action, update risk and opportunities there. So I think I may have captured that here. Yep. Here, look at this. So this is a requirement in corrective action, a step that's been added. So you take corrective action, you have a non-conformances. One of the clauses is under 871E, update risk and opportunities determined during planning planning if necessary. So the way I like to put this is a requirement that during the process of taking corrective action, you need to ask yourself, hey, were any risks or opportunities presented during the planning and implementation of this corrective action? So you're maybe asking yourself, hey, I'm having an assessment next week. What would the accreditation body be looking for in regards to compliance with this section? Objective evidence which would show that the organization has adopted a web-based approach. This may include a specific document, perhaps a procedure or other name where risk and opportunities are identified, as well as a plan to implement actions to minimize risk. Actions to minimize risk and maximize opportunities. Interview staff, what opportunities for improvement have been identified, implemented, or rejected, and what risks were identified. To go in conjunction with the requirement there under improvement, under 861. The laboratory shall identify and select opportunities for improvement and implement any necessary actions. Also, under the management review, if not documented anywhere, hey, it's going to have to be specified as an input on the management review what risk or opportunities were presented since the previous review. And this is something I like to stress right off the bat here, and it's particularly if you're a new organization. I know when we went through the transition several years ago, came across an organization that had absolutely nothing in place to show compliance to this section. Like I said, it's a hard part to assess. The laboratory determines what risk or opportunities to present. Probably a good starting point is right here under 414. You can see what the requirement is. So the way I like to express this is, hey, just need to show it was evaluated initially. It says an ongoing basis. What's an ongoing basis? Well, step one, evaluate any potential risk to impartiality. Create that record. If there is a risk identified, how is it either avoided or lowered to an acceptable risk? Hey, it's been looked at. It's been evaluated. One of the pay particularly attention to the note. Typically, we think of relationships there. This is personnel of the lab and customers, but it's other things there. So, of course, customers, that relationship typically will come at the top of the list, but the other things like ownership, governance, the relationship between management, personnel, shared resources, finances, contracts, marketing, payment of sales commission, or other inducements for a referral of new customers. Could also present a list to impartiality. So initially, go ahead and create the record that this has been looked at. And on an ongoing basis. Does that mean every day you have to sit down and look at, hey, any threats to impartiality today? I would say probably not. Most smaller organizations, perhaps once a year during the management review is sufficient, or as things change, as you get new, perhaps turnover in personnel, perhaps new customers show that, hey, is there any potential risk to impartiality here? Just wanted to highlight this. It comes up early in the standard 414, sometimes during the assessment. Sort of like to put the cart before the horse here. Risk and opportunities is 8.5, but I want to see where risks to impartiality were. It has been looked at, whether or not there was or was not any risk identified. Alrighty, that's the end of today's presentation. So give me one moment here, please. Not sure if this is a question, and if anything comes to mind, please type in. I'll do my best here. We have been asked by our auditor to improve the identification or impartiality risk. Like I said during this presentation, there's a lot of flexibility here. Just need to show a record that is being done. If they mention in particular, excuse me, impartiality, I tried to stress that during that previous slide here, just show that it's been looking at. A tag on to that question is, we have already identified the risks in the receiving process. So if that's the case, if there was, I'm assuming you were still talking about the impartiality, risk to impartiality. Hey, if you yeah, I got one continuing question here. I'm sorry. We have identified the risk to the impartial. That's good. You identify it. Just need to determine. Hey, is there a risk to impartiality? Hey, just create that record. And if there is if there is not a risk, then or excuse me, I'm trying to read as I'm talking here. If there, just show that you looked at impartiality. Hey, there was a risk. Hey, we looked at it. We have not identified any risk. Bear in mind, it's just not with your customers. It's also between personnel, shared resources, ownership, things like that. As if I'm an assessor and you're referring to another auditor here, I can't speak on behalf of them. I'm not there to say hey, there is impartiality issues or there not. I'm just there to see that, hey, you looked at it, and if you identified a risk, what have you done to either um, accept the risk, avoid the risk, or lower it to an acceptable level? What are the most common NCRs that occur in PJLA's assessment related to risk and opportunities? Don't recall. I have to go back in. I don't believe it made the top 10 list anyway. Back in January for 2022. Speaking on behalf of myself, um, and I'm not speaking on behalf of PJLA. I know during the initial, if you're a new lab, basically just a broad encompassing nonconformances. If it was not addressed within the quality management system or there was no record to show that this was being done, is the one thing that comes to mind. The other thing that comes to mind, again, I'm speaking on behalf of myself, is under 414. You have to evaluate the risk to impartiality. I need to see that that's being done initially, right off the bat. And then that ongoing basis, I think it's up to the lab to determine what is the ongoing basis. Well, again, you're talking about an auditor, that there's a correct way to identify the risk. Standard gives the labs a lot of flexibility there, as far as what risk or opportunities to pursue. I went through the shalls if they did occur during the planning of corrective action, something that you need to ask yourself as a shall there. During non-conforming work, you have to evaluate the risk level. So we'd be looking for an evaluation there because there's a shall associated. Also for impartiality, there's a shall associated with that. And also, hey, it's a discussion item for the management review. All right, I'm answering your the best of my ability there. So I don't know why an auditor would say there is a correct way. I've seen it addressed in many manners. I've seen some organizations that hey, you really take it to heart and um, have good brainstorming sessions, and this is something that's looked at impartiality. Our QA department conducts monthly meetings to discuss trends that might affect quality within the lab. Can this be considered a risk and opportunity procedure? I would say most definitely, particularly if we're still talking about impartiality there. So again, we need to see a record that that it's been that it's been done, and these meetings could be a way to create those records and solidify compliance to 8.5. Have a previous a young lady that says you'll have to deal with the auditor. I'm sorry, I'm doing the best I can. Why don't you send it, get the slide presentation and send it to the assessor. Alrighty, so yeah, good questions there. It's kind of a hard, kind of a hard area to assess. I just need to see it's being done. Hopefully it's a useful tool for you. Do adopt a methodology that will actually create opportunities for improvement for your lab. Something I mentioned at the beginning, something we probably do all along, particularly organizations that's been in business for a long time, considering risk and opportunities, determining, hey, you're weighing them against each other. Yeah, when to pursue an opportunity after evaluating the risk. And went through at the beginning of this presentation. Some everyday examples we sort of subconsciously in our daily lives are complying with this section. So with that being said, I want to go ahead and, as far as I know, there might be other webinars going on. I failed to look at that. Visit the PJLA website. I can tell you that I have scheduled one for April 27th. Excuse me, which is I'm going to look at section 7.2, selection, verification, and validation of methods. We're going to look at the requirements there. We're going to look at hey, when do you need to verify? When do you need to validate? What methods are appropriate? If you supplement the method, or if you use a method outside its intended usage. This is all addressed in 7.2. So appreciate everyone logging in. I hope this was informative. Again, feel free to go to our website, listen to the recording, and share it amongst your team members. So enjoy the rest of your day.